What if the very thing you're most afraid of, the risk that feels impossible to take, is actually a doorway to your wealth, power, and freedom? On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the story of the first time I took my first massive risk as a woman and the first time I jumped timelines and how that single decision changed the entire trajectory of my life. Everything that I teach is about wealth, leadership, and power rooted in a female body. And I want to take you back to my first moment of empowerment in my life. So let's go. Let me paint you a picture here. I grew up in California and I grew up in a place that had so much money around me. I grew up in Newport Beach, probably one of the wealthiest places in America, with a mother who struggled, who was forgotten, who was on food stamps, who couldn't find her own ways to magnetize wealth. And so the polarity between my friends who had access to everything and me who had to scrounge for quarters in the couch to go buy a McChicken to make sure that I ate at least one meal that day were so astonishing. I've been in a wealth reclamation um, healing for a very long time. So I started right at that bottom, complete scarcity. And that was really challenging for me, of course. And so, what do I do to get out of that scarcity? Get married. Yeah. I had jobs starting when I was 15, 14, babysitting. I've had a job since I was 15 consistently, for the most part, like job. I first worked at a yogurt shop, cleaning bathrooms. That was an interesting one. It was fun. I have done a lot of different kinds of jobs, but I nannied. I've done a lot of different things. And so I got married when I was 19. I met a man on the internet before it was cool on Plenty of Fish. Okay. Like this was a thing. My friends were doing it and I was like really nervous, but having Venus and Gemini, I feel like I'm going to meet all of my partners online. Like it was fun. And so yeah, I got married really based on this decision to survive, based on love and respect, but truly reflecting like this decision that I wanted to survive life with somebody. You can imagine how that manifested in a relationship. And I wanted stability. And if you know my ex-husband, he is a very stable person. And I really appreciated that medicine at the time. And so yeah, I was really chaotic at that time of my life. And I mean like still in love with my ex-boyfriend and married and trying to process that. And there's just like so much shame around this version of me that as I speak to her, like let her be in the light. Like I was still talking to my ex while married, and there was a lot of infidelity and yeah, I just didn't really want to be married. I wanted a dad. And so, you know, my ex being in the military, he was like, we have to move. I was like, what do you mean? We were in California at the time. Like, we're moving to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And I was like, no. I was really wanting to leave him. Really, really, really like doing my best. Really, really, really doing my best. Really, my ex-boyfriend, who I was so deeply enmeshed with and in love with, was like in my space and like, hey, we need to work some stuff out, which honestly we did. We didn't have the time and space. I just went and got married. So that's on me. It's a big one. Make sure you do your work and completely separate from someone before stepping into somebody else's space. That was probably really unfair to myself and everyone involved. Okay, so we get orders to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and I was like, I'm not going. We're gonna get divorced. I had just turned 21, uh, and I was like, okay, like I'm good. Like I had just gotten like plastic surgery, and I was like, I'm hot. Like I don't need this. I'm gonna attract a better man. That kind of attitude. But something inside of me was like, no, you're actually going to Jacksonville, and I was like, that's really weird. Because that was the toxic culture I grew up in. Impossible beauty standards, um, hustle basically until you're rich and burn bridges with everybody, and survival, right? I think the richest places in the world actually run the most survival energy, which is so interesting to me. They hold the most scarcity. So, yes, we had no money growing up, but the people who had money were like running more scarcity than we were being poor. So I move to Jacksonville. And when we arrive, we get to this house, and one of his friends had let us stay with them. And it was my worst nightmare. We had moved in with a man who was abusing alcohol, and I'm a child of an alcoholic. And I was like, fuck, this is my personal hell. It was like literally reliving my childhood. There was like fleas in the carpet, like it was dark and gross and probably moldy. It just felt so horrible. So what did I do? I initiated myself out of it. I was like, okay, great. We've arrived here. Thank you for letting us stay. We need to GTFO. So I convinced my husband to buy a house, which is the best thing I've ever done. It was so great. He was not wanting to do that. And I was like, we're doing it. Bye. So he finally got on board. If you've ever been in a relationship with a tourist, sometimes it takes them a little bit to get on board. But they do, right? Because they love their stability. Um, so the first thing I do when I get to Jacksonville, based off of programming, is based off of survival, is like get a job. I've been working my whole life since then, which really wasn't that much life, but I've been working my whole life and I get a job. And it's at this jewelry shop. Okay. And just to paint the dynamic, and I'm saying this because oftentimes when we take a really big risk, guess what comes up? All the fucking programming, all of the things that tell us that we can't have it. In making that decision to move to Jacksonville, I decided that I was breaking up with my childhood trauma. I decided I was going to create something new for myself, a home outside of my childhood trauma. And this move, cross country, very Sagittarius North node, was like, okay, bye, we're done with this. Anyway, so I manifest this job, which I didn't know I was manifesting, but it just happened, of course. And it was a job with this couple. And just to paint you the couple, like the woman's giving like Dolly Parton big hair, 1970s, 60s, Vava Voom vibes, and the husband is giving car salesman from Memphis. So it was a really interesting dynamic, and the man was completely a vampire energy, so vampiric. And this was the woman's business, right? She had inherited it from her dad, and he was a car salesman and then came to work for the company with her. And he was literally like basically fucking up the whole flow of it. And I could see that. I didn't know it was psychic at the time, but I could see that. I was like, this person is like the toxic part. One of my gifts, being a tree frog as my animal spirit, is literally seeing the like emotional toxic debris that needs to get moved. And so I was like, "Mm." And let me just tell you how toxic this man was. I was 21 at the time, and he was like asking me questions. And this was before like the Me Too movement. This was before women had agency at all. And I was a child. He was like, "When did you lose your virginity?" He would ask me such inappropriate questions. And I remember like telling my husband, I was like, "This is really awkward. I don't know what to do. I don't want to work with him." So, I started to work more with the owner and be in sales. This was my first sales job, like high ticket sales job. And so I was selling diamond rings. And of course, we're in a military town, so everyone wants a diamond ring for their person they met 3 weeks ago. I love it. Now, this is the most pivotal moment of my life. Thank you for hanging in there with me. So I make a pivotal decision to take a risk. Take a risk. Okay. And then I make this decision right here in this moment. I had been starting to pick up a camera and play with that. And I was like feeling it. I was like, this feels really good. I like this. I felt that spark come online and I followed that desire. So one day, naturally, because I was finding what I was going to do, there's this big confrontation. This woman comes in, and I'm very protective of women. My name is Alexandra. It means defendress of mankind. So, like, don't ever put a woman in a position in front of me where you're taking advantage of her. Like, I was not having it. And this man, she essentially buys a ring with us and comes back within 3 hours. Okay. And says, actually, I want to go in a different direction, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, great, let's give her a refund. Let's be done with it. Because personally, in my business practice, it's much more smooth in some cases with clientele when you just allow there to be a natural breaking of karma. Like, okay, I actually came, da da da, whatever. Let people be where they're at. If they're indecisive, probably not something you want to move through. And so she comes in and he puts up a fucking stink about it, blah, 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 blah. And I said, so and so, it's North Carolina law that, like, you know, 24 hours, like, someone can make a return. We had nothing posted, all sales are final. And yeah, she started crying. It was really upsetting because he was yelling at her in a way. It was really awkward. And he looked at me and he's like, "Stop being such a fucking bitch." I've never felt more hot in my body in my entire life. Like literally the dark goddess took over me and was like literally looked at him and I said, "Oh, I'm so proud of myself. Like this has always been a superpower of mine. Is standing up to men and entities." And I was like, "You will not speak to me like that. I'm done." Biggest moment of my life. You will not speak to me like that. I'm done. You will not take advantage of me like that. I'm done. And I remember walking into the back room and I'm like, okay, this is your exit. Feel the power of this. Close that door. It was probably on an eclipse, honestly. We should look that up. And I was like, do not forget anything in this back office because you're not coming back here. This is that final moment for you. So I left. I never looked back. I took a camera and I scaled a business, a photography business, to 6 figures in 2 years. Fuck yeah. Sometimes we need to take that risk. And it's in that moment of power that we really start to chart our own path. And if you're on this podcast, The Goddess Rise, you are a leader. You are the one charting your path. Nobody's template is going to actually work for you. Not your mom's, not your dad's, not the patriarchy, not even the matriarchy, whatever it is. You are charting your own path. This next series of podcast episodes is going to be about taking risks. It's going to be about taking steps forward towards our desire and learning how to be in that and navigate that. And I'm just checking my notes to make sure we got everything. I think we did. Yeah. So when you choose yourself, what you are saying and signaling to the universe is, I'm willing to take responsibility for my desire. I'm willing to want more and receive more. It doesn't mean that that journey is going to be without upheaval, change, transformation. Sometimes, most of the time, that's part of it. I didn't know how to work energy at the time. I was just following that thread. But you have to take the risk. I'm sitting here now in present time, and I have just fully closed out a relationship in my life that was so draining to me because I was staying in those situations that felt extractive, that felt draining. You cannot manifest your life path, your whatever it is, if you are still stuck in that timeline. I'm just gonna be really honest with you. I'm sorry if you're an earth sign and like stability is everything for you. You've come here so you can be a little bit more flexible, probably. But it's if you are staying stuck in old dynamics, don't expect anything to change. And how do you start to develop the capacity to be with the surrender that it's going to require you to get to the next level as an entrepreneur? I teach people how to be grounded entrepreneurs. That is what I'm here to do. I have been initiated as an entrepreneur for 10 years. Since that moment, 10 years ago, I've never been more proud of that fucking woman. What moments have been defining for you? Where have you taken risks in your life where they've actually paid off? And maybe they don't pay off for like 10 plus years. I mean, but oftentimes they do pretty quickly. Tell you I've taken a lot of risks leaving my marriage to move to Asheville, going on a solo trip to Italy, leaving a partnership to be alone with no job set up. Like there are risks that are important that will expose you to the programming, right? That is keeping you from your timeline jump. But you have to be willing to jump the timeline. You have to be willing to say, okay, I am aware and I am conscious that staying in this isn't getting me anywhere. You have to be willing to shed it all, let it go, cry, be with it, be with the death. And something new entirely will rebirth. I promise you that if you are standing in your power, standing up for yourself, standing up for others, and releasing things that feel constrictive and extractive and misaligned. Stop gaslighting yourself about it too. Like have gaslit myself. I had a part-time job for 4 days recently, and I gaslit myself about it. I was like, again, that programming that had come up, like, well, you have to get a job. You have to have a job. You have to have these like stable things. How much of that energy is our parents in our energy fields running survival program through our bodies? How do we get senior to that? And how much of that energy is a collective program that says you cannot be more powerful than employment? Like that's where you're capped is a boss. You will always have a boss. And I know that we've kind of relinquished the girl boss era, But I have a feeling she's coming back in a like she took her death real good. She's coming back in a way that's like really powerful, grounded, and secure, and is not running male energy through her body, meaning that her risk of burnout is so much less because she's being cyclical. Cyclical. She's letting the things die that need to die. What in your life are you gripping to? This eclipse, if you're gripping to it really hard, will probably be quite challenging for you, especially this next one in Aries, which is about taking risks, being bold, entrepreneurship. I don't know where Aries is in your chart, but look it up. What house does Aries rule? For me, it's the second house of resources. So I'm going to be teaching more about money. But had I not taken that risk, wealth would have not been a possibility for me. And I'm doing it again now in a very different way. Notice that we don't really we get deeper as the feminine healing journey. It's like the same thing comes up. It's like I leave a man, I find myself, I get my power back. Like it's the same thing for me. And I'm an astrologer, and in the eighth house for me is Libra. So I was always like, oh, partnership, like my wealth is going to come by having like a steady, secure partnership. We're going to be talking about like the trad wife stuff, which is traditional wife. I didn't know what that meant for a long time. But how much that programming got moved in the past year and a half because the South Node was in Libra, and how much shadowy shit is involved in giving our agency and our power and our control to male leadership. Men don't even know how to lead themselves. Let's be fucking honest. Do you have a male boss? Like, men cannot lead us where we need to go, and that's towards the feminine. Men are literally still afraid of the feminine regenerative healing powers. I've yet to meet a man who can go there. Okay, we are all deprogramming patriarchy right now in this moment. And I want to bring it back to, where do you need to take a risk on yourself? And can you resource yourself enough? It doesn't mean you have to go alone or without support. Can you resource yourself enough to have what you desire? Something to think about as we come towards this Aries eclipse. I have so many special guests on sovereignty, on power coming in for this next iteration of the goddess rites. Take that risk. Do it for yourself. Do it from your heart, from your high heart here. You'll know what it feels like. It's a sensation, it's a pull in the heart. You'll feel it in your body here. Don't think about it here. Feel it. What do you desire? What feels fucking amazing? What are you terrified of? I promise you that the reality you live right now is much more frightening than the one you're going to be in. Okay? I love you. Have a beautiful day. And I'm excited for this next season of The Goddess Rites.